Welcome everyone to No Head Podcast. If you're here for the first time, my name is Dorothy Oko, and when I'm not doing my day job in communications, I facilitate a mindfulness course at Google called Search Inside Yourself. How are you doing, breathers? That's my name for all of you who take time to breathe with me. And today my guest is Mr. Arrow Solomon Oburu, who has written this amazing book, Passing on the Baton. And we're going to spend some time getting to know him. And I am really thrilled about the conversation we're going to have. So, welcome, Mr.
Thank
Oburu.
you.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on the podcast.
Thank you again.
Because you are a wealth of wisdom, and so the book you've written and the conversation we have is one of generations talking to generation, and so I'm looking forward to sitting at your feet and learning from you. So before we begin, we normally do a breathing exercise to help us fully arrive. So I'll invite you to join me, and those of you who are viewing, you can just take time to join us in the 3 breaths that we do. So, just sit comfortably, it's easy. We breathe to a count of 5, and then we hold to a count of 2, and then we breathe out slowly to a count of 5. And we will do that 3 times. Are you ready?
Ready?
All right, okay. So, breathe in, hold, and breathe out slowly. Another breath in, hold, breathe out slowly. And another breath in, hold, breathe out slowly. And now let your breath come to its normal rhythm, not controlling anything, just breathing, letting your breath lead you, letting your breath guide you, and being at one with your breath. And now bring your attention back to where we are. And thank you. How was the breathing exercise for you?
Thank you again. Happy to be here.
Yes.
And happy to be hosted by you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, let's start with the book, Passing on the Baton. But I thought maybe before we start and before I tell the listeners and the viewers why I'm excited about this gift that you've given us, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself. How old are you? Where you went to school, and we can take it up from there.
Thank you again. My name, as you mentioned, is Arrow Solomon Oburu. I'm 83, walking to 84 years old.
Wow. When's your birthday so we can celebrate you?
My birthday is 05/05/1938. Yes.
Okay.
So, for schools, I started going to school in Kaswanga Primary School in Rusinga Island as a young boy at age 8. When I finished, those days, we did what was popularly known as Common Competitive Entrance Examination, which was done to graduate us to Standard 5.
Right.
I was lucky, I would say, because competition was very stiff. So I say I was lucky. I graduated to Standard 5, again in Kaswanga. where I did standard 5, 6, 7, and 8. Then I did at what was that time known as Kenya African Preliminary Exemption, CAPE.
Oh, I didn't know that's what it stood for.
Yes. I had opportunity to go for my high school in Kamagambo Seventh-day Adventist School, where I did Form 1 and 2, and transitioned to Bugema Secondary School of the church, where I went up to complete the high school. On completion of that, and results came out, I wasn't lucky enough to be called to Makerere, which was the only A-level school in East Africa at that time.
Right. That's where everyone needed to go.
That is where everybody went. You came from Kenya, you went to Makerere. You came to Uganda, you came from Uganda, you went to Makerere. You came from Tanzania, or at that time Tanganyika, you went to Makerere. You came from Zanzibar, you went to Makerere. And a bit of some people from Sudan.
Right.
So it was where A-level was taught. Fortunately, for me, having been born in Rusinga, the late Mboya TJ, in his foresight, saw independence looming, but there were very few Africans with education to bedrock that independence if it arrived. And in his political wisdom, got in touch with JF, his brother Robert, and other friends in the US. And they crafted airlift for Kenyans to go to the US. It remains popular as airlift.
Right.
But it took people to US. People only know the US airlift.
Exactly, yes.
But in that airlift, there were other places that people went to. I had the privilege to be selected to go to Liberia, which was at that time the second or whatever, whether I call it second or whatever, but was the two of the African independent countries.
Right.
The first one having been Ethiopia, Liberia was. But then other countries in Africa had their education developed much more than Kenyan and East African. Sierra Leone had Furabai College. Nigeria had theirs, and Ghana had theirs. So Tom actually talked with some of these other people. And those who did not get opportunity to go to the US were given opportunity to go to these other places. That is how I went to Liberia.
Right. How long were you in Liberia for?
I was in Liberia for 5 years. After finishing my undergrad, I wanted to do law. And the Liberian government was fairly friendly. They became friendly because when I was in Liberia, God privileged me with the opportunity to be president of the National Student Union in a country where I was a foreigner.
Wow. So you were quite popular then.
Yes, so that one gave me opportunity, and I was amongst the offers that the university had for postgraduate, I was selected to be one of them. The University of Liberia, where I was, had a faculty of law. So I was admitted to start law. But the urge to come home, particularly parental urge,
Right.
was come home, come home, come home. And the friendship between TJ and my father, he told me, you come if you want to go do law. The American law is practiced differently from Kenya.
Right.
We'll organize for you to go to Britain. And after I arrived, work on what they were calling Africanization
Right.
changed the priorities. So I went into civil service. Yeah, that is the story, the background.
Right.
Yes.
Wow. All right. And you were in civil service for how long?
I stayed in civil service until 1993.
You know that the generation now cannot stay in a job for that long because
Yes.
People need to get out, so they don't stay that long.
Yes. Today's generation is much different from what we were. One, at our time, there was as good as absent private sector.
Right.
The bulk of employment was in the public service and its tertiary institutions or parastatals.
Right.
Because other than mainline civil service, it was what was called East African Railways and Harbors, which was a parastatal, East African Post and Telecommunication, which were also tertiaries, government, public institutions. The only, what I would refer to as companies of substance were East African breweries and East African tobacco. The rest were small, one man or a few, a little corporate world.
Right.
So people stayed in the civil service, and it was considered prestigious to be called at that time officer.
Right. Officer had a lot of power.
It had a lot. Some were not all that powerful. Those that were powerful were in the provincial administration where their actions were backed up by law. But being an officer was a very big prestige to the officer and to even the parents. My son, my daughter, Yatena Opisa. Yeah.
Yes.
So we found ourselves stuck in. And part of what influenced us was there was nowhere else again. Where do you go?
Right.
Because the private sector wasn't there.
Right.
And you stayed on. And then there was something which nearly all of us didn't know or didn't understand, called pension. Because the private sector wasn't there. And if you had put it 10 years, this animal called the pension was really a glue. And I remember what we used to say, it is something you will, direct translation,
Yes.
Kijaluo.
And
You
is
will
it
eat it until you what?
You die.
We didn't know what it was.
Right.
We only knew that at the end, when you retire, you have something to live on.
Until you die.
But by the time we came to know what it was very difficult to live because it was just peanuts, particularly for those of us who were in the civil service before. But there we are, we remained stuck and we paid the penalty of being pioneers
Right.
and fought for changes that are now enjoyed
By the present.
by the present group.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. That is so interesting, the things we take for granted, because, as I said, the young people are just, they stay 2 years and they're moving, Gen Z, as we call them,
Yes.
and Gen Y, they don't last that long.
Yes.
If you're not showing me where I'm going, goodbye, I'm off to look for another job.
Yes.
So it's very different from your generation and a bit of my generation, where we stayed for long in jobs. You know? The one thing I wanted to ask you before we delve into the book is this notion of transition. I think that if I look at the Kenyan society now, African society as well, there isn't a proper transition of, father, son, grandfather into that, role. So I want you to find out about your transition before we get into you passing the baton to your grandchildren. Your transition from son, you're the firstborn son, you shared with me, to father, to being a father, to your 7 children, and then being a grandfather, and a doting grandfather at that. How was that transition? Because in the present community and society that we live, I don't think there's anything that marks those transitions. And so we end up with maybe a very confused, conflicted generation. I don't know what you can say about that.
Well, personally, I would make a statement that the transition before we began to ape what Mzungu gave us was very orderly. Substantially orderly. Because parents, it was gender sort of separated, gender bracketed.
Right.
But the father, all along, from age 7, age 8, the males were supposed to have dinner, particularly dinner with the father. And they sat there. And the father taught to them, I would say, apprenticed them in the values of the society, where they were taught what is it to be a male child. And so the boys were inculcated with the values of what it is to be a male. When they got to teenage, they joined their elderly cousins in, I don't have the English equivalent, but in what it was called Simba.
Simba. This is an African hat which is just meant for
Yes, which is
the boys.
the boys of 10 and above. And there they were lectured by their cousins and so forth who were elderly.
Oh, really? I didn't know that's what happened in Simbas.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
They were told, they got lectures. When you reach this age, we expect you to be married. When you get married...
What was that age? What was the age? Because I know that it has changed.
It started from, depending on families, but it started from about 20 years to latest was 27. A few got to 30. But you were really lectured. You got lectured when you get married, what is expected of you. And so there was that orderly transition, which was preparing you for responsibilities at the various ages of life. On entry of missionaries, things began to change. And I say this with a lot of respect because I was converted to Christianity. But everything, even that lecture was demonized.
Right. Everything African was demonized.
Was demonized.
Right.
So you had to do it kikisomo. And through that, because Wasongos were not available to us, we could not interact with them the way our parents were interacting with us. We missed it.
Mm.
And if we practiced the way we were taught by our parents and our peers, even the girl child, that was civil.
Right.
So we threw all that away. And unfortunately, it still sticks with us.
Exactly. We suffer. I think our community suffer because of that.
Because of that, we lost it.
Mm.
And when we lost it, we did not provide an indigenous replacement of those values.
Right.
Because one of them that I remember very well, we prepared the young men to be responsible, is some earlier Luo scholars called it virtue positive.
Right.
Try to capture whether that really captured it well. But if you say it in Luo, it had two main things. It is patro, in other words, saying who you are,
Right.
but using that patro to tell your cousin, I would say tell your cousin or whatever of his irresponsibility.
Oh.
Yes. Make sanctions. Because in that pack work, which was done when they met and so forth.
So give me an example of back work. How would it be so that you're using it as a sanction?
You use it as a sanction because when you met, you were in a group. And you'd simply tell your cousin, the Dala, Kotbiru, you get your Meruchuel, without calling the name.
Right.
But amongst you there, you knew whose mother's house was leaking because the houses were touched with grass.
Right.
And it was not, if you knew that your mother's house was leaking, you are not supposed to take offense. Because if you take offense, all these other people will turn on you. So you see, it was a way of molding responsibility. If in your family, your age group are not participating in production of food, they tell you, man, they call you.
That was okay. Wow.
And you know, they were very powerful in molding responsibility.
Right.
But the first thing that the missionaries did, that pack work was demonized.
Right.
Yeah. If you are a Christian, you are not supposed to pack with it.
Yeah.
They call it evil pride. Without understanding that because you are now become Christian, you are preparing all these other things for Christianity. You diligently and faithfully abandoned.
Right. You didn't question why.
You did question. No, you did question why. And you stopped grouping with your peers because already you have been transformed.
Wow.
And the Bible is very be not equally yoked with unbelievers.
Right. That has been misused.
Yes.
Because whatever that means.
You have grown with them, you are 14, you are 17, but because they are unbelievers, you don't belong.
Wow.
So these are some of the things that we actually abandoned, but without replacement.
Right.
Because the reason there's no replacement, the Mzungu did not have the equivalent.
Right. Yeah.
And they were not interested in teaching us, learning the values of these things. What they wanted was tell us, give me what is Giricho. So we abandoned them without replacement. And they did the damage they did.
Yeah. And many years later, 56 years after independence, we are still suffering from that part of demonizing our culture,
Yes.
isn't it? So, yeah, so you had all this from your father as a son, and you got this molding as a son living in the community. Then you become a father, you get married, you become a father. What happens in terms of what practice do you have in your home? Is it the Christian, or now you've
Let me first that the other major transition I talked about is getting ready, getting prepared to be married.
Oh, right. That was taught in the Simba.
That was taught in the Simba.
Okay.
And you are told what your responsibility as a husband is. The girls were told, because they were in what is called Sibinde, they sleeping in the grandmother's houses. And they were told what it is to be a wife. How do you behave? Now, in this education, part of it involved how do you identify as a potential spouse? Who should be involved in this identification?
Right.
I like the Jewish approach. They call it matchmaking or match fixing. The Jews call it yagam.
Oh, it's the same, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
In it, in that transition, when you reach that age, you just don't walk like we do today. I've met you, I love you. Let's go.
Put a ring on it. That's it.
Pardon?
They say put a ring on it if we met.
Yes.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
put a ring. Yes.
What happened in the match fixing? Well, dealt largely with compatibility.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Would a Jagam know that this person is...
Jagam is supposed to know the character and conduct of the boy, the character and conduct of the girl. Not anybody would pose as a Jagam. So there were either relatives
I get it.
who has connections to both sides, or the emergence of entry into urban life. People formed friends, and this is a friend who knows who you are and knows if you are a son, what is in this son? If you are a daughter, what is in this daughter? Because one thing which was very common but very powerful, Luos did not divorce.
Yes, I had that. There was no divorce. There was no divorce.
There was completely no
In the
divorce
community.
in the Luo community. It was even more restricted and strict than even the Catholics have it.
Why? Because if you said you're going to divorce, what would happen?
What they were, before we get to what will happen, the laws treated marriage with sanctity and sacredness that it was. It was not just a union of a man and a woman, or a woman and a man. It had connections with the children that will be born. And in those days, they knew that if the family breaks, the greatest losers are the children. So they provided security. The security was found in the dowry system.
Right.
And whom do you marry? Luos never married women. They were marrying girls.
Difference then?
The difference is you are a girl until you are married. Marriage transforms you or translates you or metamorphizes you into womanhood.
Right. Okay.
And it didn't matter how old you are a girl.
Also, was there an age for girls to get married? Like for men, it was between 20 and 27 or up to 30?
Yes, the age for girls started about 16 to about 22, 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
And after that, you're out of the race.
Yes. Now, what then happened, after you have agreed and the matchmaker has certified that you are compatible, there were two Haifa, Roya, Toge Jarwath.
Okay.
The Lewis called them their Orlando. The first two to enter the girl's home, there was no limit that you could take two. But out of that, what you take to the girl's home for the first time, two,
Must be...
those were the legal anchor of security of the woman. The girl turned into womanhood.
Right.
And it was so powerful. So powerful. The Lewis sanctioned separation. They are not fussy about separation. There will be some small disappointments.
Right.
But those two animals gave the woman the right to come back to the matrimonial home.
Because
And the man cannot say, you ran away, you left me, where are they? Why are you coming back? No.
He had the obligation to accept her back.
You do not even ask. She's not even asking you whether she should come back. She just walks back.
Wow. So women had power in deciding.
Very, very
Right.
powerful. She just walks back.
Wow.
And if you try it, you will attract the wrath of the community.
Oh, as a man, if you say
As a
you
man.
can't, yeah.
As a man.
Wow.
At that time, you know what the community is. And that was the security given to the women.
Right.
So those were transitional. Yeah, we were talking about the transitions.
Right. Right.
Yes. So it really helped to secure, because the culture abhorred marrying, the serial marriage for a woman, let me say. Serial marriage, and whatever. And the whole thing about it was that marriage was not just for the man and the woman.
Right. It wasn't for love, as we know
It was.
Right.
It was also a source of recharging the community with the children. And Kisumu calls it illegitimacy. The Luluas call it kemerwa. In other words, a child born out of marriage. That was the culture. A child born out of marriage
Right.
lived with stigma.
Oh, really?
Yes, with stigma. And so this is why, in all this, the man and the woman had to secure the child in society.
It was for the children.
It was for the children. Yeah.
Wow.
So that is what it was. So after you are married, like I was, to go into it after the matchmaking, you then go, as Ungus call it, asking for the hand of the girl. You go into the girl's home, and I'm usually the word girl here because Luos never married women.
Yes, you became a woman once you're married.
You became a woman after marriage.
After marriage, right.
So, you go into the home of the girl. Your father organizes an uncle of yours, and you take your peers, cousins, and you go and you are asked some of the very interesting questions. Even those who know you very well, at that time, they don't know you. Where are you from? What brings you here? And blah, 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 until the girl is brought to say yes.
Is that where the aye comes from?
No, aye is a very recent thing.
Oh,
But
really?
yes, very recent. At that time, after you have been asked all these questions, then the girl is asked to come. See, do you know these people? She would say yes. What has brought them here? Do you know what has brought them here? And some girls were very interested. They say, yes, I know them, but I don't know what has brought them here. I know them, but I don't know what has brought them here.
Right.
At that time, of course, the boy or the man really sweats.
I can imagine.
But the side of the girl will do interrogative questions. At least, yes, you know, I know them, but what not. This boy has been asked me to marry me. Some would say I told them no.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yes. But they would say, before these people came, you told us you are going to have friends who are coming. Why did you tell us you are going to have friends if you told them no? So life would start. And then the lady, you are then asked. A year is asked after the discussions.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm learning.
Then you are told, show us evidence of your seriousness, that you want us to be relatives. You don't obey what.
Wow.
All this is done by your appointed spokesman, quite often an uncle or a senior cousin of yours. So that is where, as recent as she is, you produce it.
What if you're poor and you couldn't afford the hi-fi and, you know, the car? What would happen?
If you could afford?
If you couldn't afford the hi-fi that you indicated.
You can't. You can't go into those negotiations if you can't afford.
So you'd ask the villagers, everyone to
You
help
would
you?
ask the village.
Okay.
And it's taken so serious that you cannot go into that kind of situation without the promise of IFA. Right. So you go with it. But you see, at that time, you don't take, during the negotiations, it's not when you take the animals. The animals follow later. What is given at that negotiations is a year, which is normally monetary.
Oh,
yes.
Even in those days, it was still monetary.
Yes.
Okay.
A year is very recent, very recent. It started in the mid-50s. So it was monetary. You give it, and then you are told, okay, now go and grow in the evidence of your seriousness. Jack Nyombo. Because a year is not dowry. It is a greeting gesture to the mother-in-law. That Jack Nyombo. So
So a year, was there a value more? Was it? It had to be 10,000 or 5,000.
It had no value.
It had no value. You decided.
But the metamorphosis of behavior, I would say the metamorphosis of culture, metamorphosis of behavior, now discusses the quantum, monetary quantum.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
But those who understand it, in fact, it's not even discussed. The only thing that happens, couple of Baranya Seme, ko jing ne nya semen to romo me ang o ko is not going to give legal moral alofachien. Yeah, they look at him mobiro gigi mobiro so nya ko chokre but the gist nya semen to hero with something which is appreciable. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yes. So after that one, those are the transitions. Then you pay your dowry, and comes a time when the lady is now released officially.
How is that releasing? Is the people from her side take her to the man's side?
No.
Or the jagam comes?
No. The lady prepares herself with maids from her side, and they come to the man's home, and with wonderful songs, beautiful, announcing their coming from long distance. The whole clan knows it. Kawuro Chipol, John Paul Biu. Yeah. And they come with pride.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is it. Of course, that was the prideful union. Occasionally, there was hiding union. I was almost called it an aping.
I know, my parents eloped. I know. They did. Yes.
You see, but after eloping, those maids are sent to come and sing and celebrate the marriage of their peer. Yeah. So
those were celebrated. Yes.
Those were the ways. And what used to happen, or what happened, particularly for those ones who eloped, the man will report the following morning, and the language, the words were very clear. I have a guest.
And you will do.
All the others, guests, some women have always visited him, but he doesn't go and say, I have a guest. No. When he says, I have a guest, he reports that to the mother, and the mother immediately reports to the father. Then it's known you are married. Very quickly, the dowries and so forth are organized to be taken the other side.
Right.
But the most important, interesting thing was if you had Simba, the moment you have reported that you have a guest and it has been accepted that ikawa nyaranato, that Simba ceases to be your house.
Oh, right, because you're married now.
Yes. The owner of the house is the woman you have married. And that remains with the laws up to now. Men don't own. Before we started the legal papers, the paper of law, men had no houses. Houses belong to the women.
Wow. That is emancipation before right now. That is so huge. Okay.
Houses belong to the women. The farmland belonged to the women, the wife. The chicken belonged to the wife.
So what did the man own?
The man owned security. Provision of security.
Okay.
Yes.
To look after the family.
The cattle belonged to the woman. Everything belonged to the woman. Wow. That was the. This is what it was.
Right. And that was cultural. That was our Luo culture.
Yes.
Wow.
But after entry into the Roman law, men now, the Luo men now can own houses.
And the chickens.
They can own, I don't know whether they own chicken.
Oh really? They own the cows?
They own the cows and they own the land. But whether they own the chicken, I don't know.
Okay. So what does a woman own?
Eh?
Now, in this new construct where the man owns the house because he can and he owns the farmland, the woman owns nothing.
The woman, by law, owns nothing.
Right.
Well, the law has been is metamorphosizing to say it is co-owned.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm talking of what
happened.
Yes.
Right.
Good.
So tell us, so the transition, so son, you
Now,
yes.
as my father used to sit with me after eating, we call it dual, place where you eat. I've come, I live in urban area. I'm urbanized. My children are born in the urban. So, what we now transition with is eating together. We have no separation of gender.
Right.
The daughters sit with us. The boys sit with us. In it, we talk things which now operate in today's world. Personally, I've accepted them as reality, which we can't go back to, because the urban life confines us to a house like we are here.
Right.
So where are you going to get a fireplace to sit with your sons and mama? Mama is a little bit lucky because they can sit in the kitchen. But the kitchen is for preparing the meal. Mama cannot eat with the children in the kitchen.
Right.
So what we now do is to accept this as emerging realities of family life, how people should live together. Then comes one of the big challenges that we have. Urban life has opened us to what I call cross-cultural marriages, where we bring in very substantially different marital behavior. This to me is a big challenge, but I say the best way to replace it is to have togetherness. Yeah.
And unity.
And
yeah, right.
I tell some women, even the new women, try to learn on how they did it. Because the new marriages,
Lasted.
the new marriages emphasized a lot lineage. They emphasized a lot what you are leaving to the children. Because even in this ownership I was talking about of land and so forth, that land was held in trust for the children.
Got it.
The children were the primary focus of the family assets. The primary focus of the family assets. And what we now have, mine, ours, wasn't there. It was ours throughout. And that is why Lewis did what I would say was very interesting. Knowing that men are polygamous, the Luo men, and men worldwide are polygamous.
Right.
Luos polygamize in parallel, Wazungos polygamize either in series or in deceit.
Yes, you can have your mistress on the side.
You see, other communities may polygamize, some polygamize in parallel but secret. We have communities where brothers grow to adulthood, they don't know one another. The Lewis brought them together. So some of these things actually have hit the importance of marriage and children as the focus of the union. And we now have laws. I often go to some wedding ceremonies presided over by priests, and I hear them counseling the young people. Let nobody come between you. Don't even allow the children to come between you and your what?
Yes, and your wife, your partner.
I wonder. I wonder. But that is, I think, maybe my background into things.
Right.
Because when the children is the focus, then you want to bring up what can succeed you well. Yes.
I like that. What can succeed you well?
Yes. Or what can succeed you successfully.
Right.
Yeah.
And your father passed that on to you.
That's what my father did.
Passed on to you.
Yes.
And so you start your family and you know that the focus of everything you do with your wife are the children.
Yes. Because they are the ones that are taken over from you.
Right.
Yes.
And so with the culture sort of having changed as you've expressed, now we're living in a modern house in the city, you can't have your Simba and you can't have these conversations. How do you pass on the lessons, important lessons to your sons, and your wife passes the important lessons to the daughters? Do you agree on how this takes place?
I agree that it is important. The most important thing, which I don't think whatever changes are, that whether we are urban, cannot replace, is the primacy, the significance of the child in a family. Personally, I don't believe in compromising that. Even if you're living in one little place, there are families, and it is very interesting. You go to some areas where people have just this, and you get amazed how close they are with their children.
Right.
So, marriage is for recharging society in an orderly manner, in a respectable manner. Because human beings are not other animals. But even other animals, which is and mate, they bring up their children to a certain level until they know the children can fend for themselves.
Right.
Yeah. And the human beings are the one with the longest period to capability to fend for themselves. And now it is even longer with schools. If God blesses you with what we call a brilliant, Kenyans like to call it brilliant child, exceptionally bright, then you will have to support that child until about 27 years.
Right.
Because he's going to tell you, Daddy, Mommy, I must do PhD. So, if the child is not the primary focus of you, then who else is the primary focus?
The love. So what you raise is quite important, because that's where we are lost now, because the current generation, the focus is on love. But you're saying the focus in those days, in the traditional days, in woman. It's their children. That was the focus. So you got married and you raised your children, and they were the focus so that you raised them well.
Well, there are some words that I like to discuss with people. What is love? Let's go find love in marital relationship. What is it?
I don't know. It's a feeling that makes you sort of.
What is it?
I don't know. I don't know.
I define love as knowing and performing responsibility volitionally. I know what I need to do to make my wife happy.
Right. Yes. Okay.
And my wife should not ask for it. It is my responsibility. And you know, there are things we are being taught. Is that you? And my wife also knows what she needs to do for me to make me happy.
Right.
That is what love is. Right. In marriage, it is not romance. Romance is a 10-minute affair.
Right.
But if you know, including romance is a responsibility. That is how I define it.
Right.
Even that romance is a responsibility. You know that your wife needs to be, you have to make your wife romantic. Your wife knows this man has come from work, is so tired, perhaps what I can use to make her feel relieved is being romantic. It is a responsibility. But love without performance of responsibility is artificial.
Wow. Preach.
That is me. I may be wrong.
No, you're right. It makes sense, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot of failures in marriage because we're thinking about me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is how I define love. Okay. Volitional performance of responsibility.
Volitional performance.
Like now,
yeah.
With all due respect to the young men, I'm seeing the young man in trouble. Some of them are replacing. They marry your daughter because the revenue potential of your daughter. So where is love?
There's no love, yeah.
A lady marries your son because of revenue potential of your son. Where is love?
That's what capitalism has done to us.
Eh?
That's what capitalism has done to our relationships.
So we need to be able to define in this day and time. Otherwise, we are going to, if we are married because of love, go to US, go to Europe, go to wherever they are experimenting. Those loves don't last more than 2 years. The divorce rate in the US is scary. Yeah? If you really loved me, why should it evaporate? Those who love themselves will sit down and say, this is what we are quarreling about. And say, and admit. I know the men don't like admitting, looking at the face of the wife and saying, I'm sorry. I did it. I'm sorry, I would not do it. Men don't like that. That's their animalistic nature. But you will find them a week or a month after they have changed their performance. The complaint which the wife had.
They took it in.
Yes. So, if we can do that, then things will be very good. Wow. But if we are talking of love, that I'm marrying you because of love, I don't know. I'm old. I told you I'm 83, turning what? So maybe I grew up when I didn't know this word love. Though we had, joking with our age mate, a hairy makatapenyi manate mano kakato. Because I thought of you.
That means I love you so much that the exam I was sitting, I couldn't remember.
I
anything.
could concentrate.
Yes.
No, I could concentrate.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
See, very, very romantic.
But in marriage, that's not allowed.
Mm. Wow, this is so powerful, and I think that we will end this part one on that session on that note of what love is and how important it is for us to relook, redefine what love is, and redefine what marriage is. And I think take your tips on focuses on the children and on the lineage as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is one thing that I would really want us to pick up. I know we have gone very far,
Right.
but we need to tell the youth the love in marriage is not romance. In this book, I've called it spice.
Right.
It spices the relationship,
Right.
but it's not the food. You can miss the spice and still nutritionally
Have great food.
have a great food,
Right.
but you can't eat the spice.
That's such a good analogy.
Yes, I've said that in the book.
So okay.
Yeah, I've said that in the book.
So we'll talk.
Romance and all this, these are spices. Words, these are spices. But responsibility and performance of responsibility is what I call love.
Right. We're going to yeah.
That why you must be responsible. I mean, you're a child. You must follow performance of the child in school.
Right. Be a present parent. Because these days we are not there.
You must follow. You must follow performance of the things in school. When parents are called, be there. And you can't come back and tell your wife, I love you, when you are not there to see how her child is performing. You are sending your wife, and you say, I love you. Really? What? Some of this thing I'm talking about, you will ask Paul. I learned from my mother, who did go to school. The only book she could read is the Bible. I used to ask her, how did you learn to read the Bible? And you can't read the letter I write. You say, no, the Bible I was told. That was very good.
Yeah.
But if you ask Paul, my mother shocked me. Because she took all my children to secondary school. She was there with us. She took Paul, she walked to Paul, where Paul started his architecture here. He walked to Paul to the dome. And when I was telling her, that belongs to men, he said, so what? Whatever I do, I'm just taking my my grandson to pray for her. That is what I call love. Performance of responsibility, evolutionary, not waiting to be summoned.
Right.
So I took that from my mom. When my children, she was so meticulous when my children were going to do the terminal exams. She would ask me, when are they doing page? She would pray, she would call a priest, they would be there with my father.
Wow.
But this one of ours of these days, and particularly the young men, they don't even want to go to visit the school where the children are, and yet they are saying they love the wives. What is that love? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. But that is what it is, and I think we could read there. When you do the editing, we will.
Yes.
But that talks, we will come to them. I hope I've done my little bit. I can see the editor of my talk.
But I love that. So having a great legacy, you had one from your father and mother, and have you passed it on to your children? The legacy that you talk about so fondly.
I've tried.
Okay.
And what makes me assume, I assume I've succeeded.
Okay.
Paul is busy 24/7. I can call him and he's telling me he's working at 2:30 if I have reason to call.
Right.
But you see, he has been here waiting to do editorial auditing
Right.
of the South.
Right.
That means he values me.
Yes, and it's voluntary.
No, you
Yes.
see, he values me. And valuing me, maybe he got something I gave to him which makes him value me.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
I try. I can't say I succeeded, no, but I try.
Okay.
Yeah?
I love it.
And Paul knows how much we try to do it with the grandchildren. Recently, I went to visit my grandchildren in the U.S. One of them is his son. And he saw me walking with his son, the whole campus, because of these days we now have, walking the whole campus, until the boy took me to the library. And you know what they say? The frog is in the water. Daddy is in the water.
Right.
His son, the son is named after him, Paul Jr. He say, Paul with his grandfather
In the library.
in the water. Knowing what I like. So me, that's what I pray for. Yeah. And you will find some of those captured in the book as we discuss the book.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And that's a really great way to end the session, the first part.
Yes.
And then we will go to the second part, which is talking about your motivation for passing the baton.
Yes.